Recently, an intense series of storms has descended upon my region. I won't disclose the precise location, but I can reveal that the terrain here is virtually flat, making it ill-suited to manage torrential rains of apocalyptic scale. Roughly once a year, the area is flooded so severely that the inhabitants humorously remark about the arrival of a divine messenger and his celestial entourage. The flooding is so dramatic that local legends equate it with miracles from a bygone era. My grandmother, Nana Marisol, resides on a street infamous for its exposure to such downpours. On one occasion during a visit, I witnessed a man miscalculate the water's depth and drive his pickup headlong into an impromptu 4-foot channel. He was forced to abandon his vehicle as it was swept along the thoroughfares, shaming himself by seeking refuge in a neighbor's driveway. It was a sight that underscored the unpredictable nature of our climate. Compounding the issue, the neighborhood where Nana Marisol lives is steeped in age. She raised my father, Trevor, and his sister in the very home she still inhabits, even though their old bedrooms have long been transformed into a spare room and a modest office. The passage of time has changed the house, yet its vulnerabilities remain ever present. My father has often attempted to persuade her to relocate as the house began exhibiting numerous flaws: rusted pipes, electrical malfunctions, and the clutter amassed over more than 50 years. It came as no surprise when, during the latest flood, I received an urgent call from Nana Marisol reporting that the basement sump pump had failed. Being the only relative living nearby, I have naturally become the one called upon in these emergencies, often even more promptly than the professionals, with my dad now out of state for work and his sister having passed away years ago. The responsibility has fallen squarely on my shoulders, especially since Nana Marisol is too advanced in years to deal with expert repairmen. Despite these challenges, I never find the work a burden. My love for Nana Marisol always compels me to make time for her, whether by accompanying her to appointments or helping out around the house. She has always been my foremost priority. When I arrived, she was distraught, lamenting the possible loss of treasured photographs, old newspapers, and countless mementos stored in her basement over the years. I paused to comfort her, settling her onto the sofa and handing her the lukewarm cup of tea she'd been nursing before the roar of rushing water returned. "I've got it," I reassured her, or words to that effect. To my relief, the basement was not as devastated as I'd feared. Only the barren laundry and storage room at the rear had allowed a thin film of water to seep in, barely dampening one's feet. Yet, I distinctly recalled an odd detail. One of the basement windows, which should have been swallowed by the storm's milky gray, instead cast a slender band of yellow light into the room. That beam stretched like a spotlight over a pile of books on the floor, their faded hues absorbing every stray glimmer, a portent that would later seem foreboding. Meanwhile, the sump pump, cracked under the overwhelming deluge, was laboriously ejecting water in heavy spurts. A brief online search and a subsequent call summoned a plumber to the torrent within a mere 15 minutes. Thankfully, the issue was swiftly remedied, and we bid farewell to the repairman, accompanied by a bag of freshly baked cookies that Nana Marisol had prepared that morning. While that detail might seem trivial, it underscores the gentle, caring nature of my grandmother. With the urgent repair complete, the remaining task was to clean up the aftermath. I reassured her that the cleanup was under control, especially since she already possessed a robust shop vac capable of sucking up the water. After several promises to clear away every drop without discarding anything precious, I descended the creaky stairs once more and set to work. Outside, the storm still raged, and the newly mended pump struggled to channel the runoff into the drain while I vacuumed, the cacophony merging into a peculiar symphony. Still, Nana Marisol never came down to protest, and given my fondness for loud sounds, it hardly bothered me. I finished vacuuming rather quickly, and only as I switched the machine off did I notice the pile of books once more. They were no longer bathed in that almost ethereal honeysuckle glow, yet somehow they still captured my attention. Compelled to investigate, I approached the stack and soon discovered that nearly all the books were utterly water-damaged, soaked and ruined, except for the one perched at the very top. Oddly, despite the stack reaching my knees, the water had only risen to my ankles, leaving that topmost volume completely dry and intact. It was exquisite, compact, leather-bound, and adorned with intricate stitching. Its page edges dyed a relentless deep ebony. The cover bore a delicate carving of lips, parted as if poised to whisper a secret, and it exuded an almost brand new aura. Upon opening it to the first page, an inscription immediately identified its owner, Liliana de Beau, my long-departed aunt. At that very moment, Nana Marisol called from the top of the stairs, startling me nearly into dropping the precious book. She inquired if I had finished, and upon my affirmative reply, she remarked that it was splendid, since she needed help with her next batch of pastries. Reluctantly, I acknowledged that I was quite certain my grandmother must never learn about the diary hidden within. Nana Marisol is an extraordinary soul, everything one might envision when thinking of a kind, elderly grandmother, and then some. In my heart, I truly believe she could rival Nobel Peace Prize laureates with her humility and compassion for those around her. Yet, despite her nobility, none of us can entirely escape the scars of the human condition. It is the way we rebuild ourselves from our broken pieces that defines who we are. And much like the steadfast foundation of her character, nothing could unsettle her. Not even the mention of a tragic, murdered daughter. With that in mind, I tucked the diary into the back pocket of my jeans and hurried upstairs to assist her. I momentarily forgot about it until later that evening when, while undressing for bed, the diary slipped from my pocket onto the hardwood floor with a muted thud. The supple leather absorbed most of the impact, yet as I bent to retrieve it, the book burst open in a flurry, pages scattering as though whipped by a fierce gale. A cloud of dust erupted, jostling me upright and triggering a coughing fit as I waved my hand to clear away the lingering particles. Through bleary eyes, I examined the book. It lay open nearly at its conclusion, seemingly indifferent to the chaos that had just transpired. All its pages were blank, except for a solitary line inscribed near the top of the right-hand page, penned in a trembling scrawl. He bestows a kiss upon my lips. Even as I struggled to decipher the message, the words glowed with a rosy, amorous tint under the soft radiance of a lamp, its shade crafted from pink satin, a housewarming gift from Nana Marisol. I cradled the volume with exceptional care, far more delicately than I would any other book I might risk dropping. A growing sense of unease crept over me as I recalled the slender beam of light that had first drawn my attention to it. What had once appeared sacred now felt like a sham, as if I should have discarded the tome. Yet, I understood that it had belonged to my aunt, and despite its eerie aura, there lay an undeniable sentimental value, a romantic yearning for a connection with family, evoking hazy memories of cozy Christmas feasts and backyard barbecues. I cannot deny that an alluring sense of mystery pervaded the whole affair. No one in our family had ever discussed the circumstances of my aunt's death when I was too young to grasp the gruesome details. And later, when I became old enough, no one wished to dredge up those painful memories. I turned the pages until I reached the back, only to find them entirely blank, except it seemed for an account of whoever had kissed Juliet as she continued to speak. That was the final entry in this journal. Glancing around my room, I noted that everything appeared undisturbed. Even the window was firmly shut, ruling out any phantom breeze. None of the other objects, books, notes, or personal items on my desk had been displaced. I then tucked the diary beneath my nightstand and finished changing before finally slipping into bed. Deviating from my usual habit of turning off the lamp, I instead retrieved the book once more and flipped back to that final page, running my fingers along the grooves of ink. I weighed my options. I had nearly been tempted to return the book to Nana Marisol the next day, or perhaps call my father that very night. Yet something held me back, and I convinced myself it was simply my insatiable curiosity. Moreover, I assumed there must be a rational explanation for the book's unusual opening, though its mystery eluded me. It's astonishing how swiftly our minds fabricate explanations for what we resist accepting, clinging to our harsh truths until they eventually overwhelm us. Determined to understand, I returned to the very first page and began reading the entries in earnest. I can't recall them verbatim, but those initial notes were mundane, brief observations of my aunt's daily routine, a trip to the market, a flirtatious comment from a cashier, a scolding from her mother, or even the small triumph of obtaining a coveted item that morning. About a quarter of the way through, I encountered the first mention of a mysterious figure, someone I'll refer to as E instead of by his original moniker. Though the reference was unassuming, it immediately captured my interest. I then saw E mentioned again, with a note that he hoped to reconnect soon. Unlike everyone else, he was identified solely by that lone letter, while even my father and her brother received proper names. The only deviation was Nana Marisol, who sometimes had her name enclosed in parentheses next to a title. But E was invariably mentioned by that single letter. One entry noted, "E arrived at the market today. It was nice to have company," while another described how my mother nearly glimpsed him out the window, remarking on how eerie it was. Then an entry recounted that E had kissed me for the first time since long ago, this time by the river. These tender, almost innocent notes blended seamlessly amidst hundreds of otherwise ordinary daily entries. The further I delved into the journal, the more frequently mentions of E appeared, even on days when he hadn't been present at all. Eventually, I found myself confessing without shame that I was in love with him, a truth I'd once considered sharing with my mother. It might have sounded sweet if not for the immediately following sentence, which I read over 3 times before its full impact chilled me to the core. The subsequent entry declared, "Even when I said no this time," in a desperate bid to understand what had transpired. Upon flipping to the next page, I discovered that it was not a new entry at all, but rather a cluster of pages bound together by a viscous, dark liquid that dripped thickly down my hand, the inky substance unsoftened by the room's pale pink light. The book then seemed to stubbornly revert to that original page, the one where Juliet attempted to speak through a kiss. Now, additional text had been appended, a repetitive mantra of nativity scrawled over and over, almost spilling from between the pages. The once romantic light that had bathed the words now rendered them in a violent, jarring tone. "Loves me not, loves me, love soon art." My breath caught in my throat as I instinctively clutched the book, holding it at arm's length. Unlike before, when the book had fallen softly, it now slammed onto the floor with a crack reminiscent of a shattering skull, emitting a long, agonized scream. The pages fluttered wildly in a spectral gust, each movement smearing more of that dense, endless ink. I pressed my hands over my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, yet the unending wail persisted. Perhaps it was unwise to avert my gaze, but by now it was clear I had never been prudent. When I finally dared to open my eyes again, the room's gentle pink glow had transformed into a deep, ominous red, and the liquid oozing from the diary now seeped from every book on my desk. The diary writhed on the floor like a convulsing body, and I watched in sheer terror as a skeletal hand began to crawl from between its pages. Long, sinewy tendrils barely qualifying as a finger, reaching into the open air. Only when I could see the wrist and the pressed fingers did I manage to fling myself from the bed, throwing off the covers and scrambling toward the diary. Relying solely on a primal fight response, I stomped forcefully on the protruding hand. Its scream turned shrill as it retracted back into the diary. I slammed the book shut and then picked it up, its leather surface so slick and damp it nearly escaped my grip. I then secured the diary away, where it remains to this day, still wailing within my hope chest. A padlock now firmly seals it, a somewhat ironic measure, given that I have piled several heavier volumes and even a collection of vividly colored bleeding dictionaries, gifts from Nana Marisol I once intended to sell but never did, atop it, hoping they will hold it in place.